Hello, Ryan here, and welcome to Star Citizen Sunday. This is a weekly show which covers all of the news from the week just past. Be sure to subscribe if you like what you see, and let's get on with it. This week, Alpha 3.18 continues with its third Evocati patch. We hear that new points of interest and outposts are coming in the next patch, plus we finally check out the cargo refactor and what it means for 3.18 and beyond. So before we begin, just a brief update on Alpha 3.18 and what is going on. It has just had its third Evocati patch on the PTU, which again was a persistent entity streaming stress test. This patch did have more bug fixes and crash fixes that were found during the last Evocati patch, with feedback being that stability is up massively. But not much more information beyond that. I don't know what the results were of this. I do expect another Evocati build this week, and hopefully they can get it into a state that requires no more stress testing and instead focuses on getting the patch features in and tested so that they can keep on track for early December. Of course, any Evocati patch that does drop, I will cover the patch notes here on my YouTube, so be sure to subscribe if that is of interest to you. So this week's Inside Star Citizen was a belter of an episode, kicking off talking about the changes coming to cargo in Alpha 3.18. Now, they are moving away from this very simplistic system that we have currently to more of a real simulation, with the physicalization of cargo, which allows for much more gameplay. Right now in the PU, we only have the 1/8 SEU boxes, which are currently not worth the hassle when it comes to looting or piracy, as you just cannot make a good enough return to do so. Now, the size of the boxes also brought with it many other issues, like when a ship explodes, it does drop cargo, which would mean that it would need to drop hundreds of these, even thousands of these 1/8 SEU boxes, which of course will affect server performance. So alongside an artificial box destruction calculation, they had to cap the amount of 1/8 SEU boxes to about 10% of the amount of boxes being generated. And then on top of that, who is going to bother gathering up hundreds of these 1/8 SEU boxes? It would require far too much time and effort to make the return worthwhile. Now, with this new system coming in Alpha 3.18, they have gotten rid of the 1/8 SEU cargo containers. Now everything is one standard cargo unit, so when the C2 does explode with its 696 single SEU boxes, every single one of these boxes are a real entity in the game that is tracked in the database as a persistent entity, and this means they will be interactable. You will be able to use your tractor beam to move them around, take them from one ship to another, or pick them up where the ship has exploded. Now, with persistent entity streaming and having a game world persist indefinitely, this will pretty much mean that any ship that is carrying cargo and gets destroyed will fall to the planet or moon if they're in atmosphere, or remain in space for players to stumble upon, take the cargo, creating this server history for players to find as the server continues on. Obviously, once it gets reset, then it will be wiped, but with persistent entity streaming, this won't need to be done so much. So for 3.18, when a ship does blow up, the full amount of cargo on board does not remain intact and will vary from explosion to explosion. They say between 0 and 90% of the cargo will remain behind, which averages around 40 to 50%, which hopefully could encourage more tact when fighting ships. I don't know if it is tied to ship destruction, like for example, if you use a size 9 torpedo, will that just obliterate everything rather than using general weapons? I'm not sure if that is the case or if that determines it or if it's just generally a randomizer, but obviously once time to disable comes in and replaces time to kill, of course this will be a factor. But this means that players can return to where they were destroyed and reclaim the cargo that was left upon destruction, or for example pirates can steal it. Now, there is also a new commodity kiosk flow coming in, which will help players to understand what they're buying and selling and what is available and in demand. This is using the new building blocks UI, which looks far more legible and provides much more clearer contextual information. It is definitely, from what I can see here, without using it of course, a big step up from what we currently have. Now, they did say that 3.18 is just the beginning of the cargo refactor rollout. Still to come is manual and automatic loading and unloading. They are also working on big box cargo missions, which we also read about in this month's monthly report, stating that documentation and investigation began into multi- and large container cargo delivery missions that they say could coincide with the delivery of Tier 1 cargo. Now, I'm not sure if by Tier 1 they mean 318 or later. From what they said on Inside Star Citizen, it does sound like the latter, but that could have been filmed before the monthly report was published. But finally, Chris Roberts has requested that in the interim between now and getting the physical damage system in the game, finding a way to have the ship husks remain behind after vehicle destruction to allow players to explore these ships and physically remove the cargo from inside, which I'm sure for salvaging they stated that player ships will remain behind for salvage. So let us hope that this is happening with 318, because it would be a huge step to stumble upon a wreck after a player's ship has blown up, allowing us to explore and take any cargo or scrape the hull. Of course, this is the plan once physicalized damage is properly implemented, but let us hope that for 318 they're able to find a way of doing this. Now, it was also mentioned during the CitizenCon talk with Chris Roberts that there are a couple of things that Tony Zurovec wants to bring in for the cargo refactor, but time will tell if it's possible. So let us hope that with the delays to 318, now saying December, that whatever it is that Tony Zurovec wants to get in has the time to bring this in. If I was to guess, which is completely a guess, I would say something along the lines of economy updates or utilizing the quanta or quantum simulation in some way. But again, I don't know, that is just a guess. But a great segment that we've all been waiting for to hear about, and I'm hoping with 318, cargo hauling is a much more viable option. It certainly sounds like it's going to be. Now, next up on Inside Star Citizen, it was a look at the Rastar tool since we last checked it out in last year's CitizenCon. Now, this tool is currently being used to place outposts of many varying styles throughout both the Pyro system and Stanton, and the purpose of the Rastar tool is to make it easier and quicker for the devs to place points of interest on the surface of planets and moons, and in the end, it will also be the system that us the players use to place our own homesteads and bases. Now, they say that Rastar allows the ability to directly follow the modification of the terrain topology, so that they don't have to manually adjust anything, plus it provides more granularity and modularity of the location itself. The system will create much more density of locations, filling the planets and moons with many points of interest, but he does also say, maybe later even in orbit of the planets and moons. So it does sound like they are going to try and see if this system is plausible to create maybe orbital stations, which would be pretty insane, and potentially lend to players one day being able to build their own stations in space. That would be very interesting, if even possible. We will certainly need to hear more about that, but I don't even think CIG are 100% certain at this time. Now, since we last saw Rastar at CitizenCon, visually it hasn't changed much. Mostly there have been UI changes and a lot of internal work to allow for more content and productivity. They did work on better tool integration, so they are now able to use the base tools of the editor to modify some Rastar elements. They have also moved the object containers within Rastar to be streaming object containers, just to keep in line with the new streaming process, so now the server can load, spawn and despawn some elements at will to avoid crowding the server memory. And finally, they have now converted the connector system to the item ports to keep in line with the new in-house method, which will help to better integrate systems like the resource network, which is what utilizes components like power, life support, gravity, and so on. Now, he does say there is still a bit more work to do on Rastar, but he thinks that we will love the locations that roll out, which Jared did mention will be coming in Alpha 318. So we should be seeing some new points of interest on Stanton's planets and moons beyond these outposts that we currently have. So go moving away from that style of outpost to these colonialism style ones. So not only in 318 are we getting the first steps of salvaging, which is hull scraping, we're also getting hand repairs, big updates to hauling and cargo, and new points of interest as well. I am even more excited to see this patch, and hopefully it'll keep us going while we are waiting for 4.0. So what an excellent episode that was of Inside Star Citizen. We will certainly be talking more about this on stream on Monday. You are all more than welcome to join me. So also this week, the latest lore post was Crossroads, which was written by a community member and involves a Tavaran pirate trying to escape a bounty hunter. And finally, both Squadron 42 and the Persistent Universe monthly reports were released. I have already covered the Squadron 42 report, which I will link in the description below, with the Persistent Universe's report coming next week. As always, there are some very juicy updates in each report. So that brings us to the end of the show. If you do enjoy my content, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button. Also, I am able to do this thanks to my very generous patrons and channel members. If you appreciate what I do and would like to help make it even better from as little as $1 a month, all of the links are provided below.